Join me today as we take a very deep dive into exploring Saturn in astrology, esotericism, and occult knowledge, and its association with the Bible through astrotheology. Hi, and welcome to Star World Astrology. My name is Shari. I am a Western tropical astrologer, and I specialize in shadow work. Now, today we're going to take a deep dive into Saturn and get a deeper understanding of this very vast topic. I'll do my best to simplify this very complex subject. It has very deep roots, and depending on how this goes, I may have to do additional videos to keep this shorter so that the information is not so overwhelming. Also, this is not the typical cookbook version of Saturn when it comes to astrology. I am speaking of Saturn from a more esoteric, mythological, as well as astrotheological perspective. And Saturn has deep roots in the past, and to unpack this knowledge takes work to understand it at its deepest level. So if you want to work with Saturn, he requires your time, your concentration, and your effort. Saturn is not just a moving object in the sky in the way that we understand planets. None of the planets are. Saturn has a specific electromagnetic frequency vibrational field that reverberates energetically throughout us individually. Of course, on a deeper level, how we experience Saturn in our charts is really through our own personal perceptions. But to talk about Saturn in general, he is described as the archetype of the Father who sits in heaven on the throne. And believe it or not, he is the God that is often referred to in organized religion. I know there's some resistance in saying this, and so I hesitate to say this, but it is only my opinion. And I have spent many years looking into this topic, and from a fundamental or traditional Christian perspective, even Islamic and Judaism practices, they seem to be pointing to a man called God who is made out to be an old white bearded man in the sky. And this is being unconsciously referred to, but this is the archetype of Kronos or Saturn. If you haven't studied astrotheology, you might not be able to make this connection. However, there are many indications of this. And so this is why I am making this claim. Well, first, let's look at the backstory. In astrology, from the perspective of Earth, Uranus, which is the first outer invisible planet, just after Saturn in our solar system, is or was considered the Father at some point, the Father in heaven, because he is part of our firmament. Now, Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, but Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius. We're heading into the age of Aquarius, as I've explained in my previous videos. And when combining mythology with astrology from the perspective of Earth, Uranus is the first outer invisible planet, or Uranos, which is the Greek version of Uranus. And he was considered the Father in heaven, the ultimate Father in heaven. And he actually is on the firmament now, or considered to be on the firmament. Now, Uranus or Uranos by Greek version is modern ruler of Aquarius, but Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius. In modern astrology and mythology, they match because Saturn fears being overthrown by this upcoming age of Aquarius. And in the mythological story, it's a similar story that's being told. Now, this challenge has deeper roots explained in the Greek mythology story that connects with astrology, even the Bible. In astrology, the zodiac signs, such as Aquarius, is any zodiac sign, whether it's Aquarius, Pisces, Taurus, Aries, they are the background scenery or scenario for which the planets can play out their archetypical energy. So the overarching theme of Aquarius is the evolutionary process of awakening to truth with a capital T and discovering our authenticity through a higher perspective to know thyself. This is the theme that is being played out right now. Maybe it's being integrated more slowly because, as I've said, these ages take maybe even a century to become fully integrated into our society. And with Uranus being the modern ruler of Aquarius, he's said to give us access to our higher mind where we can gain access to higher wisdom. Now, both Saturn and Uranus are wisdom. Saturn's wisdom, it comes more from the perspective of earthly material, maybe more education, things that are facts, a scientific mind. And Uranus's wisdom is the wisdom of transcendental energy, the non-physical level, as well as wisdom that's poured down from us through spirit. Now, both Saturn and Uranus, as I said, are wise, but Aquarius has in its own constellation the man pouring water, which is the wisdom or knowledge from the heavens to symbolically share this archetype that we're ready to receive higher wisdom and knowledge. So this is now giving us access to higher wisdom and a higher perspective and higher knowledge, and not just knowledge that comes from science, from proving theories, even if we can't prove it in a logical way, which we might be able to now because science and spirituality are merging more and more each day. I don't believe we'll ever completely be able to merge the two because what is transcendental cannot ever be proven, but we're making more sense of it. And by the way, Aquarius also rules the technology, the internet, and AI, which are mediums for which we're getting more exposure to this type of information. And it's being relayed faster, almost immediately, to anyone, anywhere throughout the world. Now, the mythological story reveals that Uranus was unseated by Saturn over the past few centuries, but it is now ready to return for its seat in heaven during this age of Aquarius. And as I referred to this in the video on Uranus, you can see it for more information. The rivalry has begun, and there is a war in heaven. Uranus needs to reclaim his seat on the throne in heaven. And as we enter the age of Aquarius, which is an approximately 2,150 or 60-year cycle, where the battle of the gods in the sky has begun, and as above, so below. As we can see, there is much unrest in our world, and this will increase because there is the changing of the guards in the heaven, and Saturn will not relinquish his seat without a fight. In mythology, in the past, Saturn overthrew his father Uranus, or Uranus. So there's a spiritual war taking place in the heavens on a transcendental level between the archetypes of Saturn and Uranus over heavenly and earthly matters. And this can be revolutionary for humanity, the destruction of the old structures to bring in the new and more modern or evolved ways of living. We are the microcosm of the macrocosm, and the deeper message is that the spiritual war is about our souls. Uranus wants to evolve at every level, but especially at a soul level. And to do this, we must awaken at a mass level to our spiritual sovereignty. And so for those who are open to this energetic influence, they will awaken. Saturn wants to keep us entombed in our black cube. And this is why Saturn is also referred to as Satan. You can refer to my previous video on Saturn for more information. The mythological story explains how Saturn is the current ruler of the universe overall at this time. And this is because Saturn is the last visible planet in our solar system. But while under his rulership, we're still moving through shorter cycles. These cycles move backwards. They are what we refer to as the age of Aquarius or the age of Pisces, and previously we were in the age of Aries, and prior to that, the age of Taurus. They represent periods of time corresponding to the vernal equinox as it moves through each constellation in the sky. And we have moved from the age of Aries to Pisces in the past 2000 years plus. And now we are entering Aquarius. In astrology, the former change of the Aries happened around the 1st century, where the story of Jesus, the Savior, is born. And so Aries, ruled by Mars, was the previous archetype before the 1st century began. Now, keep in mind that during this period, Saturn is the ruler of all the planets, all 6 visible planetary bodies, including the sun and moon. We refer to them as planets, even though they're luminary bodies. But in astrology, they're considered planets. And he is portrayed as the Father in heaven, we call God. Now, with a lower G. Let's keep in mind that the Greeks were responsible not just for the mythology, but also for the Bible's translation and arrangement during various periods, starting from the 1st century. So it's interesting how mythology is correlating very nicely with the esoteric understanding of the Bible. Now, Earth and humanity has been under the rulership of Saturn before the 1st century, while in the age of Aries, and will fight to continue his rulership while in the age of Aquarius, unless he's dethroned by his father Uranus. And this is where the big contention is beginning. Now, Aries is ruled by Mars, and I have said before the 1st century, we were in the period or the age of Aries, and Aries is ruled by Mars. And in the Old Testament of the Bible, Mars is depicted as a very martial warrior who's always going to war. And although he's a warrior god, he's under the influence of Saturn, who is still the Father in heaven. So there's a blending of these energies in the Old Testament if you read it. And it can be easily seen because we have all these cruel stories of wars, God that is punishing. And it talks about slaves, which is a very Saturnian thing, and killing. This is very martial, so aggressive. So if you want to make sense of it, it's really depicting the archetype that was present during that period of time. And many religions tend to gloss over these stories in the Bible and only speak about the stories that may seem useful to what they already believe. But there are ways to incorporate this by having a deeper understanding. However, I see these allegories as useful because when taken from the context for which it is meant to be understood esoterically, it has so much deeper meaning. The story of Moses and his anger at the people for celebrating the golden calf is also very telling of the change of Aries, when the golden calf would be referring to the age of Taurus, which was from 4,400 to 2,200 BCE, now, which would have been the previous age before the age of Aries, which began at around 2000 BCE through the 1st century. So the Old Testament begins with Genesis, and Mars, who I have shown is also Adam in the Garden of Eden, is depicted in the story of the beginning of humanity. If you are interested in learning more about this, you can refer to my video on Mars, but that would take a minute to explain that here, so please refer to that. Now, from the perspective of astrotheology and esoteric mysticism, These are not literal stories, but they symbolically represent the context of the astrological energetic influences during this period. On an esoteric level, these themes all point to us fighting for our souls. This is the most common theme in all stories, both mythology, astrology, the allegorical stories in the Bible. They all merge together in this one message: save our souls. Now, the New Testament is a representation of the first century that begins in the age of Pisces and is focused on a benevolent Savior called Jesus, who shows us unconditional love, compassion, forgiveness, which is also the archetype of Jupiter and Neptune, and they are the rulers of Pisces. Now we are entering the age of Aquarius, and the story is being rewritten in time. And Revelations in the Bible is depicting this transition. And although Revelations, when read and taken literally, sounds like doom and gloom and really horrifying, ultimately the theme is about the spiritual war for our soul's ascension. And the battle which is taking place is about waking up and evolving at a soul level. Ascension is an internal process of inner alchemy, and it is not about believing something or someone is going to save you. You must save yourself. And to save yourself, you are saving your soul. In astrotheology, Saturn is a major theme in many religions, seated in the principles of his archetype. For example, the Torah and Christianity, the Old Testament of the Bible, are related to Saturn, but also Mars, like I said previously. But Saturn is the dominant force of these stories because he is the final visible planet who is the father figure of all the other planets. They are the demiurge or lesser gods. These are the titans in mythology, the demiurge in esoteric mysticism, and the archons in astrotheology. Saturn rules matter, and all things in this reality is material, even our body. It is made up of gross matter. So since we live in Saturn's material world, we must obey the rules of Saturn. And in this dense reality, things must unfold through time, and Saturn rules time. Because we must take action for experiences to happen in our reality, we're therefore subjected to karma. Now, karma means action, and with every action, there is an equal reaction. So there will be consequences for everything we do, think, believe, perceive, and so forth. And all of this is adding up to our whole karmic energy that we carry as our baggage at a soul level. Nothing escapes this universal law of Saturn, which relates to the 7 primary Hermetic principles, but also from a biblical standpoint is the 10 commandments. As long as we are incarnated into a body here on earth, we are subject to these principles, starting with the all is mind, the universe is mental. So all things in this universe is a mental projection from a personal point of view that has consequences for everything that we do, regardless of what that point of view is. We are under the influences of the vibrational frequencies of this electromagnetic universe. And a better way to say this is that we are our own electromagnetic universe, and the source of our experiences begins from our own personal and unique point of view. That's why we are responsible for our own souls. This is why everything we do affects us directly, but also those around us, since all things are a projection of ourselves. This is why it is so important to live mindfully and to take accountability for everything in our lives. Uranus wants us to awaken to higher truth and to know this directly. Saturn shows us the consequences of our actions, sometimes through harsh lessons, but we don't always see the results of all of our actions in real time, since we are subjected to mental projections that result in sequential events that unfold through time. The results of our actions may not follow the rules of linear time, at least based on our ability to perceive it, but all things must get experienced in time. All things are energetically charged frequency vibrations that are continuously reverberating beyond our ability to make sense of what we are experiencing. Our reality is complex, so energies can unfold in parallel lives, past lives, as well as through our ancestral lineage and even collectively. The best we can do is make higher choices and know that the consequences of these choices will eventually bear fruit at some point, since this is an energetic signature of Saturn. Saturn is a masculine, malefic planet that rules the element of Earth. In mythology, his sister Rhea rules space from which matter can materialize itself over time. Now, there are many symbolic tributes that is made to this mythology in our world hidden in plain sight. For example, there's this object that we see everywhere. It's called the obelisk. Now, we see them everywhere and we don't really know what they symbolize. Well, although there could be other meanings that I'm not aware of, one obelisk might seem to be masquerading as a piece of art, but symbolically, it's a nod to Saturn. The obelisk is a tribute to Saturn and is the phallus to symbolize the castration of his father Uranus, or Uranus, who was overthrown from his seat in heaven. This shows that Saturn will hold the power to impregnate this material reality through his sister Rhea, who rules space, which is the womb for creation to manifest. In mythology, Saturn and Rhea's mother is Gaia, and Gaia rules Earth, and their father is Uranus, who is the original father in heaven, as I've said before. Uranus was castrated and overthrown by his son Saturn, therefore unseated from the throne in heaven. So there are many overlooked symbolic tributes to Saturn as he is celebrated by the dark or hidden forces that give homage to what he represents, materialism and consumerism. Saturn took the throne with his sister Rhea to rule over the planets during the Golden Age, and Saturn is said to rule the Golden Age and is the patron of harvest. Now, in mythology, Cronus, who is Saturn, was usually depicted with a scythe or a sickle, which was the instrument he used to castrate and overthrow Uranus, his father. But also the sickle or scythe represents the reaping of harvest during fall equinox, when Saturn is exalted, and Saturn is exalted in Libra during the fall. Now, the sun is falling below the horizon during this time of the year, and Saturn is exalted. He is now in his power because now this is the portion of the year that he is in his strength and therefore in rulership. But he takes over the power of the sun because the sun rules the first half of the year. He's above the horizon, he's in his power, he's first exalted, then he's in rulership, and then when he falls below the horizon, Saturn takes over the throne. And this comes from this ancient worship called sun worshiping. But I'll explain this a little further as I go along. So in tropical astrology, this is created from the perspective of the northern hemisphere. During the fall equinox, the sun falls below the equator and the sun is in Libra in its fall and considered to be weak. So while Saturn has its strength, the sun is now weak. Now, Saturn is known by the ancients as the black sun or the night sun, who rules the second half of the year, starting again in the fall. When the sun falls below the ecliptic, the next 6 months, Saturn is the rulership and exaltation for half of the time during those months, because in September he is in Libra and he's exalted, and then in the Capricorn he is in rulership, and in Aquarius, he is a co-ruler. So that's 3 of the 6 months that he is very strong. He is particularly strong until the spring equinox at Passover, when the sun is above the horizon. The sun regains his strength and becomes exalted in Aries. So the sun takes back his throne. This cycle is a huge part of the ancient sun worshiping, whether it's the day sun or the night sun, which is Saturn. Sun worshiping is a part of the ancient practice that is hidden in plain sight and still happening today. Believe it or not, this is happening, although it is masked by traditions that we don't make the connections to, such as Christmas with Santa Claus and Easter with Easter egg hunts and bunny rabbits. In December, there is a celebration called Saturnalia. It's celebrated in Europe around December 23rd, when the sun is at a standstill in the sky for 3 days, at which time the sun is turning over his power and relinquishing the throne to Saturn, who is worshipped as the Black Sun during the Saturnalia celebration just before Christmas. But on Christmas Day, on December 25th, Christmas is celebrated as the birth of Jesus, who is the Son of God, or the Sun God. He is a newborn, so he is not yet in his full power. He's actually reborn, but in the story, he's presented as a newborn, and so not yet in his full power until he rises back the crossover, the ecliptic, at around March 20th, 21st of each year. Now, the reason the sun is reborn on December 25th is because the sun starts to move again after it's been stationary for 3 days to make this transition from the longer days to shorter nights in the northern hemisphere. However, the sun, when it reached the highest point in the sky in June, that is the summer solstice, and the sun is stationary again during that period before it descends in the sky to shorter days and longer nights. When the sun stops moving from December 22nd to the 23rd at the winter solstice, the transition of the zodiac sign to Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, begins December 22nd. And this is when that celebration takes place, called Saturnalia. And the sun is weak, but Saturn is strong and now in his full power. Although Jesus' birthday is celebrated during Christmas, it is also his death on the Southern Cross in the sky, because he is also depicted as being reborn on the 25th of December. Now, he returns or awakens from his death passage or his dark night of the soul, while he loses his rulership over the past 6 months. And in Passover, he is reborn, and he is also resurrected from the dead, based on the Bible story, where instead of 3 months it takes for him to get to the equinox, it is represented as the 3 days after he dies in December, that he gets resurrected on March 20th of each year, approximately. For this reason, from a Christian standpoint, the Savior named Jesus is resurrected from the dead, but there is a deeper meaning in this, as it indicates a time to do the work, to fast, to pray, to meditate for 40 days during Lent, to allow the potential of the internal alchemical process of the sun, which is the external representation of spirit within, to ascend. In other words, it's a window of time that we can escape the grasp of Saturn, since he is now no longer in rulership, and we have left the hellish realms of the darkness and now have the potential of the illumination of the sun's light astrologically. Now, the mythology goes on to say that Saturn learned he was destined to be castrated by one of his sons, just like he had castrated his father. And fearing his own demise, he devoured all his children as soon as they were born to prevent the fulfillment of this prophecy, which is also his karma. However, Rhea decides to hide his son, Jupiter, and replace him with a rock to trick Saturn into believing he had devoured him. Saturn is a timekeeper and rules with a sickle or a scythe and will cut off or castrate whatever gets in his way, including his children, who poses a threat to his rulership. Saturn is regarded as the stern father, who is also the punishing god in the sky. His punishments are severe, but are meant to teach harsh lessons if we do not follow his laws. Saturn rules time, and since we need time for this dimension to unfold through space and manifest into physical reality, in which we perceive ourselves as an ego playing a role on the stage of life that we participate in, Saturn doles out the rules and holds us accountable to our actions regulated by these laws, and we must follow in order to survive and succeed in the game of life. But time can be cruel and unforgiving because time never gives us a second chance to relive the past. It only allows us to move forward with the hope that we can create a better future. Now, Saturn is the Grim Reaper who steals our attention by forcing us to invest our efforts into a future that promises us things for our attainment or material level, instead of knowing our true power that is not ruled by time, which is the present moment. Another thing to notice in plain sight is the many things that are shaped like a cube, such as the Xbox or phones and computers. When we graduate, we wear from school, we wear a cap and gown, and the cap is shaped much like a square. The judges' room wear a black robe, which represents the Saturnian laws that are based on the government's rules. The black cube is the occult nod to Saturn, who in its polarity is Satan. There are monuments of black cubes all over for us to see, but we miss these clues hidden in plain sight. On the 9/11 monument has the black cube, and all over the world there are monuments dedicated to the shape, the cube, and the black color. The Jewish religion, whether aware or not, demonstrates this by wearing a small black cube that is supposed to rest on the third eye. It's interesting to learn this, and I'm curious about what this is symbolizing. There are many interesting anomalies, even with the planets. Saturn, with the North Pole having the shape of the hexagon, as I described in my previous video, but also in doing a little bit more research, the South Pole, the wind creates this eye shape. I think this is fascinating. Saturn is a very interesting topic to me, and I may continue and do a few more videos on this topic as I learn more. If you have any comments and you want to add anything based on what I've said, please share below. This is fascinating to me to learn about Saturn's influence over us. Now, Saturn is necessary for us to live our lives here on Earth. We get the results of our hard work and effort, and as we get a better understanding of what Saturn really means, we can use it to have the necessary discipline we need to do the work on ourselves through shadow work, which ultimately does lead to soul work. If we go deep enough in doing the shadow work, at some point we will realize that the greater context of doing this emotional work is to understand who we are at a soul level. And with the practice of shadow work, we can get to this aspect of the self that is hidden from our conscious awareness. And although Saturn can create blocks, delays, denial, allowing us to remain stuck in old karma, this can be overcome if we use it in its highest potential to help us to gain a better understanding of ourselves, but through hard work, discipline, and putting in the time necessary that can help us to evolve at a soul level. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. I hope you'll subscribe and like my video. And please don't forget that I do offer natal chart readings and also one-on-one shadow work. Again, thank you and goodbye.